Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap, podcast number 1705, Saying I Do in Newspapers. Now, newspapers are a really great resource. Well, they used to be. I'm not so much sure these days because I haven't looked at any modern ones. I'm more into the older newspapers when they actually have to have print newspapers. So I always look up things in the older newspapers and things. And so I thought tonight we'll talk. I got an article through my email today from one of the many genealogy things that I subscribe to, and it was about weddings and online newspapers. And I thought, oh, heck, I am in there all the time. So doing deaths, marriages, births, deaths, and marriages in the newspaper, looking for any other information about Ekins, for stories, news articles, were they in the newspaper for something? I found very interesting details. And I also go in there and search as well for clients for their family trees to see what stories I can find that may be related to their tree. Because when you can find newspaper articles and things, it can give you a more rounded look at the person. You're now looking at their family history, not just the genealogy side of it. So what can newspaper marriage notices tell us? Oh, they can tell us many things. The core research: use marriage announcements for essential details like names, dates, and locations to build your family history, especially when you can't find the marriage certificates. Now, you may be able to find a marriage index, and you're sort of like, well, is that the person or not? Pop over to newspapers.com or any of the other online newspapers, and in New Zealand, what's it called in New Zealand? Past Papers, I think it is. Pastpapers.co.nz, I think it is. Pastpapers.co.nz, I think that's what it is for New Zealand, because different countries will have their newspapers online. Now, I've got a subscription through Ancestry to newspapers.com, so I use that a lot. Past Pages, I also use that in New Zealand a lot. It's a free service. And then there's other countries that may have free services as well, where you can go and look up their newspaper articles. On newspapers.com, you may find some information there from the different countries as well. But you can, and sometimes you'll find people on a marriage index. So pop over to the local newspaper online area and have a look through there to see what you can find. Can you find that marriage referred to in the newspapers? Because when you're looking it up in the index, they give you the dates. Or the about date. So now you can narrow that search down. I've actually got some examples to show you, which is going to be kind of fun because it's because you can get a lot of information just from a wedding announcement, and it could be this person's getting married to this person on this date, or this person got married to this person back then. Or it may have a little more detail about who the parents are, who the best man was, the maid of honor, what the bride was wearing. You get all sorts of details when it comes to weddings. And I've seen, and I wish I could find it, but I did find this newspaper article one time, which actually it was this huge newspaper article. And it talked not only about the bride and groom and who their parents were, it talked about their bridal party and how they were related to the bride and groom. So whether they were a friend, a family member, and if they said family, and they didn't just say family member, they said they were a cousin of the bride or a cousin of the groom or a sister or a sibling, a brother or sister, or a friend or a high school friend or a college friend. So they went to that sort of specific, and then they described what the bride was wearing, what the bridesmaids wore, what the maid of honor wore, what the flower girls wore, what the groom wore, what the best men wore, what the groomsmen wore, what the ushers wore, what the page boys wore. They went through the whole thing as to what everybody was wearing. Then they also, and then on this particular one, which is why I wish I could find it, they had a list of the guests as well. These were all the guests that attended, and then it had brides. This one had groom's family, and this is where my client information for their ancestors. Sorry, where their ancestors were in this article. And so we were able to go through there, it had that this was the mother of the groom, and this was the husband, the father of the groom, and here were their siblings, and here were their siblings and their spouses, and here were their nieces and nephews, and all of this. I went into great detail, and then it had, college friends and other family members, and it was just fascinating. So, so you can get just the core research will give you the names, dates, and the location, which can provide you with more information to go looking. Where do I go look now? Well, try the parish records, try the, if it gives you the name of the parish where they got married or were getting married. You can unravel connections. These announcements often reveal family ties, offering clues to more complete family narrative. So they may turn around and say in here, and the sister of the bride was the maid of honor, and then she had these siblings that were maid of honor. So now you've got some siblings listed, or you've got some cousins listed, that sort of thing. We'll show you a couple of examples. Ceremony insights. They have made the descriptions provide a window into the era's customs and the ambience of ancestral weddings. Sometimes they will go into like, these were the officiants, not officiant, officiants. They put an S on the end because there might be one or more reverends in the cases that I found, or ministers or pastors or whatever. There may be more than one of them involved in the ceremony. Era trends through advertisements. So when you scan back on the pages, there may be advertisements going. There may be advertisements for different things. You might see wedding ads reflecting popular trends and the choices of the time, from attire to venues. You may also see none of that on the wedding announcement pages, but you might see things like cars for sale, or brand new cars that have just come out, or these ones probably not, because we're going back a little further than that. But you may see clothing that is on sale. Cultural etiquette and advice. Newspapers also captured the prevailing wedding etiquettes and advice reflecting societal norms. So you might see Esquire under there, which meant they had a little bit of status as an Esquire. Understanding traditions. Articles on wedding customs and traditions offer insight into cultural backdrop of your ancestors' marriage. Now, in some cases, yes, you can find articles on weddings, and they may talk about wedding etiquette. But in this case, I was looking specifically for people. So if you wanted to go, you could go in there and you could research what was the wedding etiquette. You could research that in the newspapers, and they would have articles about different trends and things. And that's when you would also see the advertisements in there for wedding dresses, wedding suits, what else would be in there? Venues, anything, caterers, that sort of thing. Local marriage trends. Look for articles highlighting local wedding trends, which can add context to your ancestors' choices. So this gives you a really cool picture when you can go and find these articles about wedding etiquette, or see the commercials that they had there related to the weddings about how things were done in those days, and back in that particular time period. And in some of them, the wedding breakfast would take, or the reception would take place at the groom's house, or the parents of the bride, or the parents of the groom. And so it was more of a, in some days that was the accepted norm. Other times they were done at a hotel, in a conference room, in a city, in a town hall, that sort of thing, a community center. Fashion over time. Bridal fashions feature trace of the evolution of wedding attire, providing stylistic history relevant to your ancestors. So you could find those wedding dress commercials and things. Legal changes. Coverage on marriage laws can illuminate the legal landscape your ancestors navigated to wed. And these are very interesting ones that you can come up with, because it could be how people are addressed. So in the newspaper, you might see Mr. and Mrs. Fred Thompson. So you know that Fred, who could be the brother-in-law, but you don't know what the wife's name is, because it's got Mr. and Mrs. Fred Thompson, because that is how a couple was announced. A married couple was announced by the husband's name, which makes it, especially when you're going through death notices. So you're going through the obituaries and stuff, and they've got, and the sister, and they might put survived by sisters, Mr. and Mrs. Mrs. Fred Thompson. Well, who did Fred Thompson marry? I don't know, but it gives us something to look at because you may have the maiden name in there as well. Cultural celebrations. For immigrant and ethnic communities, celebrations, specialized newspapers often unique perspectives, albeit with language barriers, because some of the ethnic ones will be written in their local language. So you've got different types of announcements that you can find in newspapers. There's the marriage announcement. And these were most common, straightforward types of marriage-related articles. They typically provided information about the names of the bride and groom, the date and location of the wedding, and sometimes details about their parents and the witnesses. And the marriage announcements are the ones that were typically done to say, hey, they got married. They got married, they got married 3 months ago. They got married 2 months ago. And then you have the engagements announcing, often, announcing a couple got engaged. And you may find out information about the couple's backgrounds, like where they went to school, who their parents are, where they originally came from, if they're in an area, like in one article I found that the bride was a native of Chicago, but they were getting married in San Francisco. So it could hold information like that in there as well. And weddings, some newspapers publish detailed accounts of weddings, providing information about the ceremony, the reception, the guests, and the attire of the bride and groom. And these reports can offer rich description of the event. So you have the marriage announcement, which says, hey, this couple got married on this particular date, and he's the son of, she's the daughter of. And in some of those announcements that we will see, they mention who the father is. They don't mention the mother. And in some, they only mention the mother. And that's typically when the mother is mentioned is because the husband has passed. So if it just says that, only daughter of, and it has a woman's name there, it might have Mrs. Rose Smith. You're looking at that and you go, oh, Mr. Smith must have passed away. And then you've got anniversary celebrations. And usually they are those milestone anniversaries, especially when it comes to the 25th or the 50th anniversaries. My parents will be 60 next year. Yes. They just celebrated their 59th. So I'm super excited about that. And they'll often include photos, interviews with the couple, descriptions of the celebration, and that sort of thing. Okay. So let's go and have a look at a couple of these so we can see what sort of information. And these articles will also give you clues as to where you can go and look next. So any announcement like this, births, deaths, marriages, all of these sorts of announcements are great for farming information out. But you have to remember, some of the information that you are reading may not be 100% accurate because it depends on who is writing the announcement. Especially when it comes to funeral announcement, obituaries. Most of the time the information is correct because somebody close to the person who passed is the person who wrote it. It could be that they may have misspellings in there because that's the way they've always been told it was spelt. It could be they may have a date incorrect. But most of the time, depending on who wrote it, as to how accurate the information was. So you just got to keep that in mind. It's the same with any of the announcements. Who wrote the information and who did that. So the first one we're going to go and look at, hang on, I've got to see which one. All right, so first of all, we're going to look at, let me go down here and go share screen. And I want, this one. Okay, so this is the United States. I put in Eakins, which is my maiden name, because I know that there's Eakins from the area that my ancestors came from who moved to the US. Whether any of them are in here, I don't know. But I've searched from 1850 to 1900 in the US, just complete. And the only other thing I've done is here in categories, I've put marriage. So that's the thing. And I can narrow it down by newspaper. I can sort it by the best match, oldest date to the newest date. And then they've got more filters over here, any days, all days, everything. They also have over here that they've only got 3 states with information on marriages for the Eakins during this time period, where Eakins is mentioned. And they've got here, Kansas has 3 matches, Kentucky has 1, and North Carolina has 2. So we're going to look at this one, which is from Marion, Kentucky, and this was January 4th, 1900. And this says holiday weddings. So this newspaper article has holiday weddings, and it shows that on December 25th, Alice Dalton and I guess it's meant to be Marie, because it says, that to me also looks like it could be Mrs. as well. So it could be a second marriage. Agnes B. Eakins. Now, this could actually be an L that's in here, Elkins, because that's a spelling of Eakins, but not necessarily related. So that could be but she could, it says here, that could be Mrs. Agnes B. Eakins, which means that she could be married before. She could be a widow. She could be a divorcee in 1900. You never know. So when you go looking for this, is Eakins her maiden name or is Eakins her married name, and she's getting married for the second time to Alice Dalton, or maybe the third or the fourth or the fifth, depending on what was going on. So that doesn't give us a lot. It just gives us the groom's information and it gives us the bride's information. But we can go looking further and going on Ancestry or My Heritage, and we can do more searches on those to see if we could find the marriage license or the marriage record for this couple, because on the marriage record it should show us if what their status was when they got married. Were they a spinster? Were they a bachelor? Were they a widow or a widower? Or were they a divorcee? It will show that on the marriage. It should show that on the marriage certificate. So that's one that we can look at. All right, so let's go back to here. All right, now let's go down here to Kansas. All right, so this is from 1895, and we've got Blanche Eakins. Why is she mentioned in here? So Livy B. Tibbetts Jr., editor of the Blue Rapids Time. So that's the groom, okay? And he was a junior editor at the Blue Rapids Time. Why is this important? Because we've got his occupation, which is going to make him easier to find on census records. Now, this is in 1895 in Kansas. So we can't look at the 1890. We can't look at 1890. We can't look at, because that's, I think, the one that was destroyed in the fire. But we can look at 1900 to see, are they still married, and where are they living? And Miss Blanche Eakins, both of Blue Rapids, so they both were married Tuesday evening at the Presbyterian Church. So this is a marriage announcement to say, hey, we already got married. Now, you've got to now count back, because this was published on Friday, May the 24th of 1895. So now you've got to count back to Tuesday evening. So we've got Thursday would have been the 23rd, Wednesday would have been the 22nd, and Tuesday would have been the 21st. So they got married on the 21st of May, 1895. Oops, sorry. What else is on this page? Let's have a look. Let's scroll out here and see what else we've got on here. Let's see any... So this has got lots of cool information on here. You've got the different announcements and all of that. Let's look over here and see what we've got in the... Oh, you can get the Webster's International Dictionary. Look at that one. This one doesn't have a lot of really cool commercials on it. I'm looking for ads. Send your subscriptions, tell your neighbors. So this is subscribing to the actual newspaper itself. 1 year for only $1.25 for the New York Weekly Tribune. You get that for $1.25 for a year. Woohoo! There's not a lot of stuff in there in that one. Let's see. What other records do they have in here? They've got civic announcements. They've got church announcements, local happening, memorial services. So these will be for people who have passed. John Jeffries and the wife of Lennox, Iowa. Now, John Jeffries and wife of Lennox, Iowa, passed through here last Saturday en route to Colorado Springs on a pleasure trip. Mrs. Jeffries is a cousin of E.E. Wilkins, one of our citizens, and spent Sunday with him. And yes, you will get this sort of stuff in there. I tell you, newspaper, you want to know what was happening? You just read the local newspaper. That's all you needed to do. It had a lot of good stuff in there. All right, so let's have a look down here. Oh, so here's another one for the same wedding. Blue Rapids, okay, an editor married. Blue Rapids, Kansas, May 21st. So this actually has actual day, and this was published May 23rd, which is the day before we saw the other one. Mr. Livy B. Tibbetts, junior editor of the Times, and Miss Blanche Eakins, both of the city, were married in the Presbyterian Church this evening. So this was actually written on May 21st, but not published until May 23rd. The occasion was one of the social events of the season. So you may actually be able to go back into one of their local newspapers and see if there is a bigger article about this couple. Because it was a social event, there's going to be a bigger write-up of it instead of just a little mention. So there's another one. And in that one, you could find out more information. So let's see what we've got down here. So here's where their marriage licenses were issued. So now we've got Libby B. Tibbetts and Blanche d'Estes Eakins. She was 21. He was 22. This is their ages over here. And it's got here that their marriage licenses, this is May 24th. So this is after their wedding. We already know they got married. It's always interesting, these things. So we already know they got married. Just things were done. Let's see, citizens' time, licenses to wed. So this is where they got, this is another couple here that got licenses issued. We've got a James Evans and Estelina Eakins. Might even be Elkins, I don't know. But that was December 6th, 19... I'm trying to see if I can find any more on Blanche and them. Okay, so that's all they've got there for that. Now, to find out more about this couple, I would probably have to do this. If we go Blanche Eakins, and we want that done like that, and we want to take that off. So we want all categories. And this was in actually it changed. It didn't stay with Blanche. I'll put the okay. Here's one with a Blanche Eakins in it. What does this say? So this one is in Blue Rapids Times, which is where they got married. And this is in 1891, so before she got married, 4 years beforehand. And Miss Mary Sheldon gave a very pleasant party Tuesday evening in honor of Miss Florence and Blanche Eakins. Now, Mrs. Florence and Blanche Eakins, which means that Florence and Blanche could very well be sisters. They both had the same last name, so they could be sisters, or they may be cousins. But I would suspect in there it would be sisters, which could make it very interesting to find. And we wanted 1895. Oops, hang on. That's among those present. Blanche Eakins, 1895. All right, so let's see what we've got here. We're in Kansas. All right, so this is Editor Married. We've already seen this one. That's just a little write-up being the social events. So that could actually be all that it is. Let's see, what else have we got in here? And so you can just go through and you can start looking for things. Oh, here's a Greenleaf Journal. A slightly different one. Yep, it's our same couple. We're married on Tuesday evening. The journal extends congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Tibbets. That was just a short article there. I was just trying to see if we could find anything with a bigger one. But we're going to move on. So let's go back over here because I want to switch screens now and go to a different one. We're actually going to look at the UK. Yep, this is the one. So this is the UK. There's a lot of Eakins in the UK. It's almost as good. It's almost as popular as Smith. And this one here, I found this one. This is in Gloucestershire. It's not my relatives. Okay. So this one here is in Gloucestershire. It was printed on Thursday, April 23rd, 1885. And a fashionable wedding at Pressbury. And so a fashionable marriage was solemnized at the St. Mary's Church, Pressbury. So we've got the location and the name of the church. This morning between Francis Harry Eakins, I'm not sure what the MM means, but he was the son of Henry Charles Warray Eakins, Esquire. So a little bit up there. And Marion Elizabeth Pearson, so there's the bride, the daughter of John Pearson, Esquire of Pressbury. So now we've got the name of the groom, the name of the bride, and the name of the fathers of the bride and groom. The officiating clergy were the Reverend John Bagot Delabray, late vicar of the parish, and Reverend Frederick, it's an abbreviation there, Gurney. Now, I actually have Gurney in my family tree. I've got a second great-grandmother that was a Gurney. The present vicar, could this one be related? I don't know, but that would be interesting to find out. There was a large congregation. Punctually at 11:15, the bride, who wore a dress of rich white gosgrain with train, was conducted to the altar by her father. She was attended by bridesmaids Mrs. Mary Eakins and Miss Pearson. So now we've got a Mary Eakins, which could quite possibly be a sister, and we've got a Miss Pearson daughter of W.H. Pearson, not a sister of the bride. Sorry, Miss Mary Eakins be the sister of the groom. So Miss Pearson, the daughter of W.H. Pearson. Now, if you look up here, Elizabeth Pearson is the daughter of John Pearson. So now we've got two Pearson families involved. We've got W.H. and we've got John. John is the father of the bride. W.H. Pearson is the father of the bridesmaid. They could be brothers. Okay, so we're starting to flesh this out a little more with the family. And they're of Warwick House, Cheltenham. Which is where this is all taking place. Mr. R. Eakins being the best man. Now, Mr. R. Eakins could quite possibly be the brother or a cousin of the groom. The service began by the choir singing the well-known hymn, The Voices That Breathe Over Eden, followed by the 128th Psalm. After that, the hymn, and it goes through all the different hymns. And, while the bridal party was signing the register, Mr. Belcombe, the organist, played the wedding march. The wedding party then passed from the church into the, I didn't want to mess up the name, passed from the church to the residence of the bridegroom where the wedding breakfast was served. So they then went back to the bridegroom's house. The presents were costly and numerous. So you can tell this is kind of a society wedding. This afternoon, the newly married couple left for Devonshire where they intend to spend their honeymoon. So they're going to be going to Devonshire for their honeymoon. So there may even be a newspaper article in Devonshire saying that the couple were there on their honeymoon. The bells of the parish church rang out a merry peal in honor of the happy event, which caused quite a stir in the parish. So that's one of the longer ones where we got a lot of good information there. And this was in 1885. So the next census in the UK was done in 1891. So we could then go and have a look for Francis Harry Eakins and Elizabeth Eakins, because she'll be Elizabeth Eakins at that time. So we can go and look for them to see where they're at, where they're living. They may still be in the same area, because I would say that, but people didn't move around much in those days. So the quite likelihood of them being in Prestbury, in Cheltenham, in Gloucestershire is very, very high, being there in 1891. And then by then you can see if they married, how many kids do they have at that point, and just more information about them. Let's see, what else have we got in here? This is a little one. Let's have a look at the little one. Okay, so we've got Eakins to Jardine, 11th installment, 11th at St. Mary's, Stoke, Newington, Alfred George Eakins of Fairbank, Park Hall Road, East Finchley, to Jessie Louise, daughter of Mr. A.G. Jardine of Boothane Road, Stoke, Newington. Okay, so I don't know if they're from kind of from the same area. I don't know. We'd have to look it up on a map to see how close these two areas were. But in this one here, we have the name of the groom, where he was from, and we have the name of the bride and her father and where they were from. So this is 1891, August 15th. So they just missed the 1891 census because that was done back in April of that year. But they would definitely be on the 1900. They should be on the 1901 census. And if you wanted to find them before that census, then you'd be able to look at in fact, you will find them on the 1891 census, just not together. You'll find Alfred George Eakins on the one for Fairbank, Park Hale Road in East Finchley, and you'll find Jessie Louise with her parents hopefully with her parents in Boothane Road, Stoke Newington. Unless she was a servant somewhere else, she'd be living at home. She wouldn't be living off by herself in 1891. Okay, fashionable one, we've already done that one. Let's see, this is a different one. Okay, so this is Eakins to Gilchrist in August 30th of 1899. So they're 2 years away from the UK census. So at the Holy Trinity Church, Combe Down in Bath, by the Reverend H.T. Thwaites, Harry Albert Eakins to Angus Louisa, daughter of the late Sergeant Major Colin Gilchrist of the Scots Guard in 2nd Somerset Militia. So now we have, this is a really cool one, because Albert Eakins, Harry Albert, we're not so worried about what he does. We'll find out on the 1901 census what happens with Agnes, Louisa, and Albert. But from the Zeffie, from the 1891 census. Sorry, teaching people. Cheapest girl. From the 1891 census, we'll find out more about Harry and what he does. But if you're the descendant from these two people and you want to find out more about the family, you could look up the military records of Colin Gilchrist of the Scots Gardeners, 2nd Somerset Militia. So we actually have that he was a sergeant major. We have where he was serving. And so looking up military records, we'll be able to find that information and find him fairly easily on other information. So now you've got that as well. Now, the other thing about having the churches listed here too is that you can go back and look at parish records. And some of the parish records, you'll see the handwritten albums of the records. All right, well, let's do one more and then we're out of here. Let's see, Fashionable Wedding, done that one. Holy Trinity, done that one. Cambridge Weekly News. Cambridge is getting close to where my, Lewis. I have a Lewis in my tree. Okay, so we're looking for Lewis Eakins down here. Oh, here we go. In fact, this is one of my, oh my goodness. All right, so this is one of my, these ones are related to me. Let me put it that way. Wait, enough. Go lay down. Go patrol. Go on, go patrol. All right, so this is really exciting because this is actually one of my ancestors. So Eakins and Longland. Longland is the family they married into. In fact, it's in the other room. I actually have a book on the Longland family in which it mentions the Eakins in there in quite ways. So at Warboys is where we had the manor house. So this is kind of, I'm going to have to save this one. Okay, so Eakins to Longland. So at Warboys on the 27th Let's see, this was Saturday, October the 6th, 1860, when this was, I'm all Twitter-pated now, when this was published in the Cambridge News. So Warboys, which was actually in Huntingdonshire, which is right next to Cambridgeshire and has now since been merged into Cambridge. So Huntingdon no longer exists. It's now part of Cambridge. But at the time, they were Huntingdon and Cambridge. Huntingdonshire and Cambridgeshire were two separate places, but they were next to each other. So on the 27th so I'm thinking that would be the 27th of, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at my records. By the Reverend William Finch, Mr. Lewis Eakins to Martha Elizabeth Longland, oldest daughter of Thomas Longland, Esquire, and Warboys. So Thomas Longland is written quite a bit about in the book that I have. And Lewis Eakins not in there so much. But there are a lot of Eakins that come out of Warboys who have the middle name Longland because they came from this couple, and they also came from John Eakins, who married Anne Longland. That's where my connection is, John Eakins and Lang Longland. Lewis, if I remember correctly, was John's brother, and Martha Elizabeth would have been my great-grandmother's sister. So that's quite a cool find. I'm going to have to go back and get that one. Well, that was a cool one to end on. I didn't even, yeah. I got to go find out what alt means. 27th alt. Does that mean the month before? Or I'll have to go look at that one. So that one was quite a cool find. I'm definitely going to have to go and look that one up. In fact, I can't even wait. I'm going to go look right now. Let's see. I want that tree. And find in tree. It was Martha Elizabeth, wasn't it? It was in that article. Martha Elizabeth. I found her already. Let's have a look. So Martha Elizabeth Longland is the wife of my second cousin 3 times removed. So there's my connection to that one. Yeah, she was born about 1837 and died 12th of February 1902 in St. Ives, Huntingdonshire, England. So her husband Lewis is my second cousin 3 times removed. So that's how that couple in the newspaper fits into my tree. And let's see, do I have their actual marriage date on here? I've just got 1861 in Warboys. Now I have to go find out what that alt means because they weren't married in 1861. They were married in 1860 on the 27th. So now I have more information to add to the tree on that, and I'm going to have to leave all of that sitting there because I got to go walk the dog. But just seeing that, you can see some of the information that was gained from the different the different types of marriage announcements and things. We didn't see any engagements. Another record, so just getting that from newspaper articles, just stuff in the newspaper. Some of the obituaries you will get. I love the obituaries. Oh my gosh, I love obituaries so much that you can get. If it is a female that has passed, you will quite often get her maiden name because they will list who her parents are. Now, you can get some that are very detailed and some that just provide a little bit of information. I tell you. I want to search. That's not always. I've changed this. Search all of legacy. All right, I'm just going to put in here the last name, Eakins. This is one of the slowest websites. Legacy.com is great for looking up obituaries, but I will tell you this. It's a very slow website. Let's see. Trying to think what the last result type. Obituaries, location, more filters. Okay, view results. 170 of them. I just put in Eakins. Let's see. Oh, these ones will be more recent. I really don't want to go into these ones because this will have living people mentioned in their obituaries. Let's see. I want to keep that one. So let's go over to our other thing and let's look for Eakins, obituaries. Nothing. I didn't want Blanche Eakins. I told you that. Okay, let's look. And that, I'm going to do a quick one on this. 1900 to 1920. That'll work. Blue Rapid Times. Okay, I'm picking this one. All right, so I'm going to do this one real fast just to show you what information you can get in an obituary, although I'll probably talk about obituaries on another night, this one. Okay, so this one here is Mrs. Sarah Lass Eakins, Riverside, California, Daily Press. This is from Blue Rapids Times, which is the one that had the marriage announcement of Blanche Eakins, who got married to Tibbets. And this is January 1st, 1920. So full of years and accumulated good deeds, Mrs. Sarah Lass Eakins was today laid tenderly to rest in Evergreen Cemetery. She passed to her reward yesterday morning after a life lived simply, trustfully, and helpfully. Funeral services were conducted by Reverend George Lawton, were held at the family residence on Ottawa Avenue this afternoon. Interment was at Evergreen Cemetery. Now, some will start off this way. Some will start off with what we're about to read. Mrs. Eakins had almost rounded out her 88th birthday, having been born in Deal, England, 87 years, 10 months, and 10 days ago. Oh, I've never seen that put in there before. Deal. I had something come up in Deal earlier. She became the... Oh, I saw that. Okay. I had something actually come up with Deal in England. It was their wedding announcement. I found that. She became the bride of William Eakins 66 years ago, and their happy married life was severed 7 years ago with the death of Mr. Eakins. She had lived in Riverside 28 years, coming here from Blue Rapids, Kansas. She possessed a simple religious trust and exemplified it in many deed of kindly service. I'm not sure what's in there. Her health began to fail about a year ago, and she was tenderly cared for by her daughter, Mrs. Harry Neal. So this is when we tell you the way that names were done in that particular era. You don't know what Mrs. Harry Neal's first name is. So you're going to have to go back and have a look for an Eakins married to a Neal record to find out what Mrs. Harry Neal's name is. And also to look on the 1920 census, because this is done January 1st, 1920. So she won't be there. So 1920, you'll be able to find Mrs. Harry Neal with her husband on the 1920 census, which was done April 1st. Surviving Mrs. Eakins are 5 children as follows. Look at this. Mrs. L.B. Tibbets. Remember we saw her wedding stuff earlier? So we already know what her first name is. And L.B. is her husband. It's not Blanche. She's Blanche. She was Blanche Eakins of Blue Rapids, Kansas. Now, when it says as follows, it's usually in age order. Mrs. John Ching of San Francisco. Reverend Grove Eakins of Middlebury, Connecticut. Chas, which will be Charles W. Eakins. And Mrs. Harry Neal of Riverside. So Mrs. Harry Neal is the youngest out of the 5 surviving children. So that is kind of a death thing. We already know what the husband is. We know where she was born. Let's see, what do we find out in this one? That she was laid to rest in Evergreen Cemetery. She passed her award yesterday after mourning of a life. So this was published on Thursday, January 1st, which means she probably passed on December 31st. So we'll look for a death certificate around that time. So we can work out her birthday. She was born in Deal, England, which is in, where was it? Hamptonshire. Hampton. Yeah, Hamptonshire. I think it was Hamptonshire that Deal was in. So Deal, England. She was 87 years, 10 months, and 10 days ago. So if you want to go to that date calculator thing, there is actually a date calculator. You can Google date calculator, it'll come up, where you can put in, this is the date. I want to subtract 87 years, 10 months, and 10 days, and it will give you a roundabout time that she was born. So now you can look up baptismal records, birth records, baptismal records, because in those times they didn't register births. They did it through baptism records. And on some of the baptism records, they would actually write the birth date on there. So that gives you some idea of how far back you can go and what you can look at. She was the bride of William Eakins 66 years ago. I came across their wedding announcement earlier. So I can go back and I can put that piece together. And it was severed 7 years ago when he died. So he died in 1913, if this is 1920. Actually, she died in 1919, so he would have been 1912 around. So now we can look for that. She came to live in Riverside 28 years ago, so he would have passed in Riverside as well, coming here from Blue Rapids. She is possessed as a simple religious trust exemplified. And we know William's full name because he was mentioned in the marriage thingy that we saw earlier. So see how this is all tying in together? I've got chills. And we already know that Mrs. L.B. Tibbets' first name is Blanche, because we looked at their wedding thing earlier, which had mentioned just her father's name. Mrs. John Ching, we would have to go and have a look at the 1920 census, but we know they were in San Francisco. So what could her possible name be? We'd also look for an Eakins to a Ching to Eakins wedding record as well. Reverend Grove Eakins, we don't know if he is married, but we can look at the 1920 census to find out. And we can also, because he may not be Catholic, and we can also go to see if we can find, and he lives in Middlebury, Connecticut. So we wouldn't have to look at that when we're doing the census report. Chas W. Eakins, that'll probably be Charles William as a guess, with the dad being a William. Be Charles William Eakins. And so again, looking for marriage information about him, looking for him on the 1920 census. And he's of Riverside as well. So they've got the places so you can narrow down even further where they were in 1920. And this was done 4 months before the 1920, the US federal 1920 census. So this is only 4 months beforehand. So we've got places that we can start to look for more information about Sarah's thing. Now, she's got the middle name Lass. Often, I've noticed this in America a lot. the middle name would be her maiden name. She would have been born with another one, with another name. So Sarah something Lass. And then when she got married, her middle name got dropped. Her maiden name got put in as her middle name, and then she took her wedding name. I've noticed that trend in America a lot. So this gives us a lot of information. And the cool part is that it ties back to one of the wedding announcements that we looked at earlier. So I'm going to keep that one there as well because I want to go back and see all that. So anyway, hope that was helpful. That's all about marriages in newspapers. Tomorrow we might look at deaths in newspapers and see what we can find in there, because there's some really cool stuff that'll come out in obituaries. And I would go on Legacy and show you some of the really cool ones that I have come across. The problem is that Legacy only goes from I think it's 2000 or 2010 forward, which means it's going to have a lot of live people in there. So I'm not going to show those. I'm going to go back and look around the 1920s or earlier, because most of the people mentioned in there may not be around these days. So they'll be pretty old if they were. So we'll be looking at obituaries from that time period, around the turn of the 1900 to 1920 is when we're going to go and have a look at some of the obituaries, because they won't have live people in them mentioned in there. It may have listed, 27 grandchildren and 23 great-grandchildren, something like that, but we don't have names, so that's okay. But I won't show the Legacy one. If you want to check out Legacy, just go have a look on Legacy and just type in random last names and see what comes up, and you can see some of the obituaries that are there in that one. But anyway, so tonight we talked about marriages and the information that you can find in newspapers, and we did 2 different countries. We did the US and England, so you can see the differences between the two. And Zeffie knows I'm winding up because she's getting she's on her patrol. So if you have any questions regarding this, please let us know. And my question for you tonight is, go look up your relatives in the newspapers and see what information you can find about them for marriages. What information can you find? Was it their first marriage, their second marriage? One of them, we kind of thought that maybe there was a second marriage involved because she was Mrs. And Eakins was her last name. So was Eakins her married name, which was more than likely? And was she a widow? Was she divorced? What was her reason for getting married again? Because she was already a Mrs. So why did she get married? Was she divorced, or was she a widow? More than likely a widow. And I will tell you this. Some people back in the 1800s through to the early 1900s, on the census report, and you'll see this on the census report, you will see this on some marriage announcements and stuff as well, is they will put that they were widowed rather than divorced. Because divorce had a very bad stigma about it, a very bad thing about it. It was sort of like, yeah, no, we're not dealing with that. Oh, she's divorced. Stay away from her. So people would turn around and say they were widowed rather than divorced, unless they're in the area where people knew them. If they moved to a new location, they would quite happily put that they were widowed. And that would be on the census reports, and that would be on if they got married again, they'd moved from one area to another and they got married again, they would say they were widowed rather than divorced. Just to stay away from that, because being a widow was more acceptable than being a divorcee. The guys were the same as well. Although the guys didn't have as much stigma about being a divorcee as a woman did back in those days. So just a little other fluff of info. Anyway, go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening. Go look up your relatives in the newspapers to see what you can find on their marriage and on their marriages. What information, their marriage announcement, their engagement announcement, their marriage license issuance. See what information you can find, what interesting wedding information you can find on them that may give you clues to other people, family members, or family members you didn't even know existed, especially when they start listing who were the bridesmaids and the groomsmen and that sort of thing as well. Maybe there were cousins listed or siblings listed that were in the bridal party as well. Anyway, go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, konara.